Is a World War II veteran. It will be sitting because he's in a wheelchair, so you're welcome to stand if you need to, but he'll be talking. We have the speakers up nice and loud. Delbert is one of our main teachers of children here. He comes anytime we ask him to teach high school students about his experiences during World War II. And it's one of the most compelling stories that we have ever heard with the kids, and they are mesmerized by it. And I thought, you know, I'd really like for you all to hear some of these stories, because we're teaching our children through you all, and you know, you need to hear them too. And so Delbert joined the Army Air Corps in 1943 at 19. He was a B-17 ball turret gunner. Not a fun job. His airplane was shot down on his 19th mission, and he became a POW and was eventually sent on a forced march. So today, and he's written an incredible book, which we're going to be carrying in the gift shop eventually, but it's just incredible, his entire story. Very well written. It's written the way he speaks. And so I'm going to turn this all over. Let's give Delbert a warm welcome, and he's going to share with us his story.
Thank you so much. We just have a closing prayer and go home as far as I'm concerned. Great job talking with your new people here. This is a great pleasure for me to be here with you today and be able to face this beautiful crowd, proud of citizens of the great United States of America. I love this country. And even with all of our problems, America is still the greatest nation on earth. She didn't tell you how old I was, and I'm glad, because when you start bragging about how old you are, that's a sign you're really getting old. And so I don't brag about it. But you know what I do? 1,000 veterans of World War II are dying every day. And so each morning I go and look at the obituaries to see if my name is there. Went by, he talked about the cemetery, man running the cemetery. I went by the cemetery the other day, and just to kind of do a little window shopping. I see these men working around there, and I asked them what they were doing. He said, well, we're building a fence around the cemetery because so many World War II veterans are just dying to get in. Now that said, I'll go ahead and do what I came here to say. It's a story about my war experience, and I'm going right through it, and as much as time will permit this morning, because we're running short on time already, and I'm going to have to rush through this, but nevertheless, I want you to just know that when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, America was drawn into World War II, and President Roosevelt called it a day of infamy, and so it was. It was a sad day for America. It was a sad day for the world. A Japanese admiral by the name of Yamamoto said, "I fear we have a lion by the tail." And he was right. America lost 414,000 Americans in World War II, and another 100,000 still missing in action and presumed dead. That's over 500,000 of America's finest. The 8th Air Force, of which I was a part, lost 80,000 airmen in the air war over Germany. 50%, one half of those who went into combat in 1943 and flew missions over Germany failed to return. 50% of them were lost. So it's my pleasure here to be able to be here today. America lost 400 ships in the first year of the war. But we fought back and we won. We won because we made the sacrifice. We won because we were united. We won because we were one nation under God, indivisible. And the women rolled up their sleeves and went to work while they were building ships and planes and tanks, while the men went off to war, left home and family and went off to war. And there was a great emptiness in this land. No home was spared and no family left untouched. My mother had 6 of her 9 sons in the service. 4 of them in harm's way in World War II. But Mom never stayed home and felt sorry for herself. She took a job working in the defense so that her sons could come home soon and safe. My wife and I were expecting our first child when I was called into the service. And to see my wife standing at the railroad station, tears streaming down her cheeks and 6 months pregnant, hardest thing that I ever did in my life. And when I saw the Statue of Liberty fade out of sight in New York Harbor, I felt as though my very world was coming to an end. I was called into the service, and I was a ball turret gunner on a B-17 flying bombing missions over Germany. And as is said, I was shot down on my 19th mission. We were on a mission to Regensburg, Germany, and it was during the big week when everything that would fly, could fly, would fly, and that included our airplane, Betty Boop, the pistol packing mama. Betty Boop was on her 2nd round, and she was getting pretty old. And the ground crew said she shouldn't be flying. But the major of the squadron of the 390th Bomb Group took her up and flew her 12,000 feet. No bombs, no gas, no passengers, no formation flying, and she flew all right. So he says, she will fly, and so we went. And our mission was Regensburg. We fought our way across France, and we're approaching the German border when our plane began to lag in the formation. This really bothered me. Really bothered, because the fighters would just wait and watch for stragglers. They would pounce on them and bring them down almost at their leisure. Well, anyway, when I was put into service, I failed to say, a gun was put in my hand, and I learned how to use it. I learned how to kill people. And the people that I was shooting at were shooting back at me, trying to kill me. And they almost succeeded. And how did I feel about what I was doing? I was a soldier. And soldiers are not supposed to cry. But I cried every day inside where no one could see. I cried from loneliness for my family. I cried for the loss of lives of the young who were just starting out in life, young men in the prime of life. And I cried for the enemy, men and women and children that I knew that I was being a part of their destruction, and this was the hell of war to me. Anyway, we're talking about going on our 19th mission. Well, we continued to lag when there came a call from the pilot. abandoning operations, returning to base. And this was the same as a death knell. A lone bomber deep in enemy territory, a sitting duck, was what we now became. We'd barely left the formation, heading back toward England, where there came a call from the bombardier fighter, 3 o'clock glow. I swung my turret around and looked off the right wingtip just out of range. I could see a squadron of fighters. And I asked, "Are they ours?" "No, sir," came the terse reply from the bombardier. "Those are Goring's elite yellow-nosed ME-109s. Well, I watched them as they came around in front and lined up on our nose, flying just a little low. And from this approach, that angle, directly on our nose, the top turret gunner couldn't touch them. The radio gun couldn't touch them. The 2 waist guns couldn't come to bear on them. The tail guns, of course, were pointed the other direction and couldn't come to fire on them. The only guns that could come to bear on them from this angle were my 2 ball turret guns and the nose guns, which are operated by the bombardier and the navigator, who were not trained gunners. So there we were, and there they came, and I watched them as they made their approach. And I was on target, and I was using every skill of gunnery that I possessed. But they kept coming, firing as they came. And it was like I was shooting blanks, because they just kept on coming. And suddenly there was a blinding flash, like lightning striking inside my turret. A 20mm cannon shell exploded in my turret, or went through my turret. Went through my left leg, and part went through my left shoulder. You see, I'm in this position where my knees are right up against my stomach, and that shell came through the window, went through this leg and went right on up through my left shoulder. And that's how close it was to my head. I looked at the shatterproof window just in front of my face, and there was a 4-inch hole directly in the center of it. I should be dead. Only God in heaven knows why my head had not been blown off. But I was still alive, and I knew that I had to get out of my turret, get out fast, get up in the waist of the plane and clip my parachute onto my chest, because you can't wear your parachute inside the turret. It's left up inside the waist of the plane, and that's one of the big dangers of the ball turret. You have to lower your gun, reach up to the controls. I only had one hand, reach up, and the turret responded to my touch. It had come straight down and forward position before you can raise the lid over your head and get up inside of the waist. I reached up for the controls, and the turret responded to my touch. So I lowered my guns, and then I pushed on the door and tried to get it open. It had been jammed. The door had been jammed by the explosion that took place in my turret, and it wouldn't open. And so I did the impossible. I somehow, and I don't know even today how I did it, I got my feet up under my rump and straightened my legs and put my back up against the door and just heaved, and the door popped open. I crawled up inside the waist of the plane and clipped my parachute onto my chest and looked around. The waist of the plane were empty. The 2 waist gunners had received orders to bail out, and they were gone. And so I went to the open door and looked out, but I didn't jump. I thought about the tail gunner, little Phillips back there in the tail, way back in the back. And so I decided to crawl back and watch and see see if he was all right. I stooped down and started back, and a voice said to me, "Don't go, no time." If I'd have gone, I would have found Phillips dead with a 20-millimeter shell through his head. And I would have died right there with him, because there was not time. So instead, I turned and went to the open door and looked out again. But I didn't jump. I thought about the radio operator. I looked up into the radio room. I could see the radio operator, Marshall Peck. And he was in the center of his room, and he was literally firing into space. I worked myself up to his position, and I says, "Let's get the H out of here, she's gonna blow." And he just kept right on firing. And I said again, "Let's get out of here, she's gonna blow." He just kept right on firing. I reached up and I raked his hands off the control, pushed him off toward the open door, and pushed him out. And I watched him disappear through the smoke and the flame, and then I followed. We were at 30,000 feet. It was 60 degrees below zero. Not enough oxygen at that altitude to keep me awake and to keep me alive if I didn't freeze to death. And my life's blood was literally flowing out of my body. And so I didn't pull my ripcord. I free fell for over 4 miles before I pulled my ripcord. And the moment that I pulled my ripcord, I went totally unconscious. And when I woke, I was lying on the ground on my back, and I was staring into the business end of a dozen enemy rifles. A squad of Hitler's finest was just standing there watching me bleed to death. And I didn't care. I was so far gone on the loss of blood and from shock, and I didn't care whether I lived or died. But someone cared. A little dark-haired lady pushed her way through that ring of German soldiers, came to my side, took my first aid kit off of my belt, gave me a shot of morphine and administered to my wounds and stopped the bleeding. I don't know where that little dark-haired lady came from, or how she had the courage to defy these German soldiers, but this I do know. She was a godsend because she literally saved my life. And as soon as she had got me pretty good shape, I went unconscious again. And I awoke much later in a room that glowed with whiteness. And I thought, I see this angel clad in a strange gray uniform standing over me, and I wondered, am I in heaven? Well, I certainly didn't feel like it. I figured I was in that other place, and old Satan was punching his pitchfork in my eye. And so the pain that I had, because of the pain in my eye, the only sleep I got was from sheer exhaustion. Anyway, I'm not going to say anything about except that they weren't able to save my eye. They tried, German doctors tried, but they didn't. They weren't able to do it. It just wasn't to be. Anyway, my nurse Marie, that's who, the one that was there taking care of me, and she had to go home to see her family. She took care of me for 3 months while I was in that hospital. Every need that I had, she supplied. And she was German, and she was faithful, but she was my friend. And she was a German nurse. And anyway, she had taken care of me for the 3 months, and she had to go home to visit her mother, whose home had been destroyed by American bombers. Then, about 2 weeks after she left, doctor came into my room. I was lying on my bunk. He looked down at me, and he looked as though he had come to kill me. And I wondered what I'd done. He walked back and forth in front of my bunk and looked down again at me with that same look, and I still was wondering what in the world is going on. And he said, "We bring you here to our hospital. We give you the very best that we have to give. We treat you as our own. And then this happens." And I couldn't even imagine what he was talking about. I said, "What happened?" "Our nurse Marie is dead, killed by American fighter planes. Her train was strafed when she was on her way back to the hospital, and she was killed." And I said, "I'm sorry, very, very sorry. She was my friend too, and she was. She had been my only ray of sunshine in a world of pain and sorrow, and now she was gone." A little while after Marie had left, I left the hospital and traveled across Germany in a freight train with a bunch of other prisoners. And you can imagine what that was like. No food, very little water, and we were traveling across Germany to the prison camp. One morning, this is a true story. One morning, the train came to a screeching halt, and I heard aircraft in the distance. And the guards who were watching out the little windows yelled something in German and headed for the open door, and I was right behind them. I didn't even know I had a wounded leg. I found a ditch inside the railroad track, and I lay as flat as I could and watched as a squadron of B-47 Thunderbolts swooped from the sky to do what they do with this train. They came down, they throttled back just above stalling speed and came along and looked at us. I could actually look out and see the pilot in the cockpit as he passed. And I waved my hand trying to get a ride back to England, but there were no takers. Anyway, ordinarily, they would strafe that train from one end to the other, they would come back and strafe it again, but they didn't. They blew up the locomotive and then disappeared. Go figure. Anyway, a few days, 3 days after that, after we finally got another locomotive, we went all across Germany to a place called Stalag Luft 4. And I think if you don't know what Stalag Luft is, Stalag is prison, Luft is air. It's a prison camp for the Air Force who were shot down. And I went to Stalag Luft 4. And there I remained for 14 months. I got one shower in 14 months. Anyway, yes, and I received one letter from home in 14 months. My family, I knew absolutely nothing about them, and they knew nothing about me. And my brothers fighting the war in the Pacific, I didn't know whether they were alive or dead for 14 months, and I waited. And I finally got a letter from home from my mother. And it's the only letter that I got during that time that I was in prison camp. On February the 5th, 1945, 14 months after I'd been prisoner of war, we could hear the Russian guns in the distance, and we knew that we were going to be liberated. We were going to be free. And so the next day, we left the prison camp, a place that had crushed me nigh to death. And I looked back on the empty camp as being covered with snow, and to erase it totally from my view, but time and distance has not erased it from my memory. We were going home. We knew that we were on our way home, but we didn't know that we were going to be a part of one of the most tragic events of World War II, and probably the most little known. It's called the German Death March. 6,000 American prisoners of war left Stalag Luft 4 on the 6th of February, and we marched 600 miles in 87 days, sleeping on the open ground in the dead of winter, on a starvation diet. The sick and the dying fell by the wayside, and we just left them and went on down the road, not knowing whatever happened to our friends who couldn't make it. The next 3 months later, May the 2nd, that night, we were camped by a little old town, and a little American, probably a J3 or a Super Cub, came a-putting over, and it dropped these leaflets. And I picked one up and read, in English and in German, "This will give you safe passage through the Allied lines, signed Dwight D. Eisenhower, Commanding General." I picked one up and I knew that we were going to be free. Went to bed the next morning. That whole camp turned and walked out onto the Autobahn, walked 2 miles down the Autobahn, and we could see these Americans coming toward us. We dropped our filthy gear and ran and embraced them and listened while they told us we were free. We were free to go home to our families. And my time is gone, but we were able to be in France for 2 full months before we got a ship to bring us home. And 14 days later, we arrived at Newport News, Virginia, where there was a little band playing "Don't Fence Me In." Men bigger and tougher than myself fell down and kissed the ground and looked up and thanked God for this great United States of America. We were free. We were going home. And this is all about freedom. This is all about sacrifice. And before I close, I want to tell you one thing, that freedom and sacrifice go hand in hand. There is no freedom where there is no sacrifice. We made the sacrifice, and we made America free. And now, with the younger generations not here today, have an obligation to make certain that to take care of this great country, because as I say, freedom is not free. I watched the flag pass by today, and it fluttered in the breeze, and the young Marine saluted it, and then he stood at ease. And I admired him in his uniform, so young, so tall, so proud, with hair cut short and eyes alert. He stood out in the crowd, and I wondered just how many men like him had fallen through the years. How many died defending this great land we love? How many mothers' tears? Then I heard the sobering sound of taps when everything was still. I listened to the bugler play, and I felt a sudden chill. And I wondered just how many times that taps had meant amen. When the flag had draped the coffin of a brother or a friend. And I thought of all the children, the mothers, the wives, fathers, sons, and husbands with interrupted lives. And I thought of ships a-mouldering at the bottom of the sea, of unmarked graves in Arlington. No, freedom is not free. God bless you. God bless America, and thank you kindly.
You see why he's such an inspiration to all age children that come here? He talks to thousands of them, just like this. It's incredible. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to take any questions you have. First, I want to give Delbert a coin as a gift from the museum for you. Thank you so much for coming. You're more than welcome. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing such an intimate story.
If you have any questions,
yeah. And if you have any questions, raise your hand, and we'll take a few now, and then we'll go ahead and break off, and people can come in and talk to him after that. Questions?
questions.
I have one. How old was your daughter when you got home? Was it a little girl or a little boy?
A little boy, and I never saw him for 3 years. A little boy, and I never saw him for 3 years. When I got home, he was 3 years old.
Wow, and you have a son here now. Is this the same son?
This is one of my sons. No, this is not. This is one of my younger sons. We had 7 sons. We raised 4 of them. 3 of them died with what they call RH blood factor before they ever knew what it was. And we lost a set of twins and a twin with the RH blood factor. And then they found out that you could take the baby early and do what needed to be done. And it's not a problem today. But then we lost a set of twins and a little twin from RH blood.
Well, that makes you even more special. Okay, if there are no questions, you're welcome to come up and talk with Delbert. He'll be here for just a little while and see his medals that he brought with him. Thank you so much, and have a great month, and hope you come to our Warbird Roundup. Don't forget about that at the end of the month.